You are serving as one of several honorary co-chairs of the Spectrum Presidential Initiative. Why did you agree to lend your name to this effort?
For a couple of reasons. First is that libraries have been the savior of my life. From the time I was a little kid reading books at my local county library, I've always appreciated the fact that in order to lead, you need to know how to read. In order to read, you can then enhance your chances in life. And to me, although a lot of things can rescue young people from the challenges of society in the 21st century, there's nothing that makes you stronger than to have an agile mind, good judgment, a rich resource of experiences through reading. And the library, to me, is a sanctuary for those who want to make a big impact on our society.
Okay, as the author of many opinion pieces on race, how important is it in your view for library staffs to reflect the diverse melting pot that we see daily?
It's critical because the thing about it, if you think about the history of libraries, it's always been influenced by those who can contribute something that others should read. And if you don't have all the people at the table who can make those important critical decisions, we'll miss James Baldwin, we'll miss Toni Morrison, we'll miss the incredible work that so many prominent African Americans have written over the years. And we also will miss what our children need, a sense that they too can be great if they get a chance to read some of the great authors who made incredible contributions over the centuries. Some of them are less known than others, but the whole goal here is to make sure that we open up opportunities so that more richness of opportunities, more diversity of perspectives, and more deep, reflective, both fiction and nonfiction works will have on the maturity and the growth of young people in particular.
Now, you touched on this briefly, but what role have libraries played in your life, in your road to becoming a Harvard Law professor?
It's very interesting. When I wrote my book, All Deliberate Speed, I wrote a chapter about growing up in my hometown of Merced, which was segregated because of the fact that the poor blacks and Latinos lived on the south side of the tracks and the whites in large part lived on the north side of the tracks. But we had a great public library on the south side that I would attend regularly. And it became a competition. The more I read, the more stars I would get. The more stars I would get, the more excited I would be. The more excited I became, the more I wanted to explore what reading would do. And it actually took me away from a life of poverty and despair. I forgot for a moment that I was poor. My parents didn't finish high school, but my grandparents were one generation away from slavery. And I imagined that through reading that I was somewhere else doing something else, not to escape the travesty, but the luxury of reading and learning that life had many things to offer. I just had not explored them. And so reading became a very fundamental aspect of my life, and it continued with my wife making the same critical importance to our children, reading before they could even speak, so they'd hear the words, appreciate the words, and don't you know that once they were old enough to speak, it was clear that they'd learned from those lessons. They told me early intervention, not at 5, not in kindergarten, but long before, with children is important. And it doesn't mean you have to be the wealthiest person in the neighborhood. You can go to a public library and get a few books and teach children. You can use resources in the public library and teach children. And our libraries, to me, are the very fundamental aspect of our society's ability to treat its children with dignity and respect. Without them, we're in very big trouble. And the picture is very bleak.
Can you recall a favorite librarian or a library experience that touched you in some way?
Well, it was going to the librarian at our county library, which is not far from my house, but I walked there. And she looked forward to me every day, coming and said, "Oh, Charles, you're back. I have 4 new books for you." That she was thinking of me not as a black kid or as a kid on welfare or as a kid whose mother was struggling with the fact that my father was not there and trying to raise 6 children. She saw me as an individual who loved reading, and she was excited. It was the excitement of that librarian that made such a big difference. And it also ended up playing a bigger part of my life as I went on to high school as well.
Okay. Now, academic libraries seem to be faring a bit better than our school and public counterparts, mostly due to funding. Do you think that the role of school and public libraries is just as important as those in the world of academia?
I think that's even more important, because one of the things is that people in academia have resources, they have access to power, and they can usually affect the aspects of things that make a difference in the lives of their students. Public libraries are for everybody, and the idea of leveling the playing field, I'm not talking about equity leveling them down, but leveling them up so that no matter your class, your race, your gender, your religion, there should be no barrier between you and the opportunity to learn. It's about learning, and we learn that people can not just read books, but then they can read about Picasso and then maybe look at a Picasso painting as we did in France, and then have a sense about it, about him, about the message that you won't just learn in school. It takes some special effort to do that. So I think if we talk about a public library that serves the needs of the people, it has to expose them to all of the elements, and funding and resources are critical to the future of public libraries.
Now, it's a well-known fact that you taught both President Obama and Michelle at Harvard. Now, the association is constantly working to ensure funding for our nation's libraries, as you well know. If you could get the ear of the President or Michelle on the topic of library funding, what would you tell them?
Very simple. President Obama and First Lady Obama, I wouldn't say Barack and Michelle, as I've said for 30 years. You know what's most important in your children's life? It's education. And how do they get that education? Through reading. You know what was important, as you both have shared with me, in your lives? Education. And how did you get to that point in education? Through reading. The same benefits that you had helped both of you come from president now to a situation where you had a teenage mother who was white, you had a father who was absent from your life, and yet reading and learning changed that life for you. And Michelle, going through the challenges of a father who suffered and died much too young from multiple sclerosis, but he was committed to make sure his children, Michelle and Craig, would go on to college. They both went to Princeton. They both went on to get advanced degrees as well. And that's because somebody cared to lift them up. And so if there is a mandate coming from the White House, either from the President or the First Lady or both, it is that in order to lead, you must read. In order to have the chance to read, you should not be barred from the opportunity because of your race, your gender, your class, or any other factor. And so to the Obamas, it is to give to others what you have had and give them the same chance, whether they're 3 years old or 5 years old or 15 years old, but when they have the chance to formatively think about it and say, yes, I too can be the President of the United States. Yes, I too can be a tenured professor at a great university. Yes, I too can be a CEO. I can be a surgeon. I can be an educator. I can play all these roles. And education, particularly reading, is what would empower these young people. And nurturing and mentoring from those of us who have had success from mentoring and nurturing for others should also be considered and be a part of our mission from the White House to every house throughout America.
All right. Anything else that you'd like to add as we conclude?
The most important thing is that there are far too many libraries today that are not open 7 days a week, that are not open on weekends, not open at night. We have 24-hour jail service and only a limited library service. We've got our priorities wrong. And if we want to save our children, save them from themselves and save them from sometimes a hostile environment, we have to give them free public access to information to learn, to critically argue issues, to understand the importance of nurturing and developing into mature human beings. So the library, in a sense, is a mirror to our success in society. Without it, we fail. With it, embracing it, empowering it, supporting it, and encouraging it, we can only succeed.